So the first rolling of the wheel of the Dharma. All you have to do is say that, and I know it gives lots of people shivers. Lynn's nodding. The first rolling of the wheel of the Dharma. What even does that mean? And something about the way those words are just put together. It definitely, well, for me, I think it's a phrase that is full of meaning, and I don't even know what it is really. It's something that makes me kind of shiver. And it's the third talk in the series that I think is called A New Light in the World, or A Light in the Darkness, something like that. What is it? Nobody knows. It's something like that. Satyajoti will know. Thank you, Light in the Darkness. And so Vidanya just spoke beautifully about the attainment of perfect enlightenment that Siddhartha Gautama achieved under the Bodhi tree. And we had that lovely image of the arrows falling as flowers at his feet, in his peaceful aura. And then last week we had Pranyahudaya talking about his decision to teach, based on that image of lotuses, that we're all lotuses emerging from the mud, all with varying amounts of dust in our eyes. Bit of a mixed metaphor, I thought, Buddha. But anyway, those two things. They refer to us, how we are in potential Buddhas, all of us. And so this week, I loved, at the end of Pranyahuday's talk last week, I loved the way he went. Do you remember last week he said that he took that first step? He'd made the decision to teach, and he took that first step. I thought that was really evocative. And I'm continuing. That's the story of what happened after he'd taken that first step. So he decided he would teach, but who? His reasons were probably to do with gratitude, and also practical reasons, that he wanted to teach people who he felt would probably stood the best chance of understanding what it was that he'd seen. And he understood with his Buddha eye that his teachers had sadly just recently died. So he remembered his 5 friends, the kindness of his 5 friends who'd supported him when he was going through his ascetic practices. And Vidanya talked about all the grisly details, didn't he, about the Buddha, Siddhartha went through all these trials, trying to subjugate the body, and it didn't work. But his friends left him in disgust. He had like a mouthful of rice pudding, and they all went, "What? I'm off!" He's left his noble quest. He's backsliding into luxury, and they all left him. So he thought, I'll go and find them, because they were still engaged in this horrible ascetic practice. And this little bit is all in first person. The Buddha I love this, because it's actually the Buddha telling the story of this himself later on to his friends. And he said, "Then the thought occurred to me, to whom should I teach the Dharma first? Who will quickly understand this Dharma? Then the thought occurred to me, they were very helpful to me, the group of 5 monks who attended to me when I was resolute in exertion. What if I were to teach them the Dharma first? Then the thought occurred to me, where are the group of 5 monks staying now? And with the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, I saw that they were staying near Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana." And then he took that first step. And he met someone on the way, and who couldn't work out who he was. And the Buddha was standing in front of him, and they were traveling like that. They met, and he said to him, "Who's your teacher? Who are you? Are you an angel? Are you a human being? Are you an alien?" He said to him. And the Buddha couldn't answer yes to any of them, because he tried to explain that he wasn't any of those categories, that he'd gone beyond. And the bloke was like tapping his foot, rolling his eyes, and he was like, "Yeah, whatever." And he went on his way. And it's like, this is the first person that the Buddha meets after enlightenment, and he didn't want to know. He just didn't believe him for a start, and he just went off and like, "Yeah, whatever," and went on his way. He said something like, "May it be so, friend." So he went off anyway. He passed him by, and he went. And the reason that he didn't recognize him as a human being, because there was something very, very different about him. He just looked incredibly beautiful, and there was something amazing and different about him. So he gets to the deer park in Isipatana, and his friends see him coming in the distance, and they say, ignore him, don't talk to him, don't talk to him. He who was living luxuriously, straying from his exertion and backsliding into abundance, which might have meant that he'd had like one meal a day or something like that. But don't talk to him. Put a seat out for him, they say, if we'll do that, but he can sit down if he wants to, but don't do anything else, let's ignore him. But they couldn't do it. As he started to get nearer, they were like, when there's it Toy Story, when those little aliens go off towards the big alien. It's a Toy Story. They're a bit like that. When they saw him coming, they were like, oh my God. And they started, so they couldn't do it. One went out and got his bowl. One went out and got his robe. One welcomed him in and got him a seat. One gave him water to wash his feet. Because they couldn't not welcome him in, because he looked so beautiful and I suppose interesting. And of course, they'd been his friend for a really long time. So maybe that was just it. They couldn't stick to their pact of ignoring him. But neither could they get over the fact that he'd given up the ascetic life. And he tried to tell them, he said, I didn't give up the ascetic life. He said, the deathless has been attained, and I will instruct you. I can teach you. You can do it as well. And 3 times they said, no, you've given up. You're living luxuriously, straying from your exertion and backsliding into abundance. Because that was the only way they knew. That was the only way they knew to practice. They couldn't imagine any other way. And the Buddha said 3 times, I can teach you. I've done it. I've achieved the deathless state. I'll teach you, and you can do it too. So in the end, he had to say to them, have I ever talked to you like this before? Have you ever heard me say that I've achieved Buddhahood? Have you ever heard? And they're like, well, no, actually. So they said, all right then. So he said, in this way, I convinced them. So he taught them the Dharma. And he explained that the life of asceticism doesn't work. What they'd been through all those years doesn't work, doesn't get you anywhere, which must have been quite hard to hear. But neither does living in a palace with luxury, proper luxury that he had when he was growing up, neither does that work. I'm going to teach you the middle way. And so for us, we have to think, what's our middle way? Our middle way probably isn't anything like the Buddha's middle way, but might seem quite ascetic for us, but we have to find our own middle way. He taught them the middle way. And there are 2 main modes of communication in life, isn't there? There's concepts and images. And we had the images. We had the image of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. We had the flowers, the lotuses. But when it came to teaching his friends what he'd realized, he had to use a concept. He didn't have any choice. He had to use words. Obviously that was only going to get them part of the way, but he had to start somewhere. And that is where he started. So if you can see from there, this being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. And that was what he said to them. And, this wasn't some clever thing that he thought up. This was direct expression of his enlightenment experience. So the experience itself goes beyond words, but luckily for us, he did more than that. He chunked that down into the teachings that he gave at the first rolling of the wheel of the Dharma. And then he spent the rest of his life finding other ways to explain what he taught on that day. Luckily for us, he did that. So the Four Noble Truths. Okay, 30 seconds with your person next to you. What are they? What are the Four Noble Truths? Okay, that's it. That's your 30 seconds. Maybe you got one or two, then maybe you got them all. Do you want to shout them out? Shout them out. There is suffering. Next, truth number 2. Yeah. Truth number 3. There is a cure. Truth number 4. Oh. Ta-da! There you go. So the first rolling of the wheel, the first time the Dharma had been heard in the world. And this concept, so we're just going to leave them there for a minute. This concept framed in this image of this wheel, what does it do to us, that first rolling of the wheel of the Dharma, to hear the Four Noble Truths? The symbol of the Dharma, the 8-spoked Dharma chakra. I think of, when I think of it, I think of a ship, you know, the ship, what's that called? The helm, is it? The wheel itself. That's what I think about, you know, a ship setting sail, going on an amazing journey, or thinking about a wheel on a chariot. I imagine it needing a great big push, and then energy and determination to keep it rolling. The Dharma chakra has a huge kind of symbolism in all around the world, and I'm not going to go into it. I don't know a huge amount about it. But all of this happened in the deer park with this little band of well-intentioned, scruffy young truth seekers. All this happened and in this deer park. And I wonder, and I've been there, and lots of people here have been there, I think. I've been there and stood on that spot where it happened. And, you know, you can almost hear the creak of the wheel being turned. And it's rolled to us. 2,500 years later, it's rolled right to us. Wherever, and I'm just, you know, wherever we were. And so, yeah, it's rolled to us right where we are. So somewhere it rolled to us. And then we rolled here. We rolled up at the Sheffield Buddhist Centre and began the intro course, and here you all are. Welcome. It's your 3rd week, I think the intro people have come. Yeah. And he taught them. This is what he taught them. So I think, what have I got? Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. So during this utterance, there arose in the utterance of that and this and the other things that he taught them. I'm sure it wasn't like chronological like that, but listening to the Dharma. During this utterance of the teaching of the Dharma, there arose in the Venerable Kondanya the spotless, immaculate vision of the true idea. Whatever is subject to arising is subject to cessation. When the wheel of truth had thus been set rolling by the Blessed One, the earth gods raised the cry. At Benares, in the deer park at Isipatana, the matchless wheel of truth has been set rolling by the Blessed One, not to be stopped by monk or divine or God or death angel or high divinity or anyone in the world. On hearing the earth gods cry, all the gods in turn in the 6 paradises took up the cry till it reached beyond the retinue of high divinity in the sphere of pure form. And this 10,000-fold world element shook and rocked and quaked, and a great measureless radiance surpassing the very nature of the gods was displayed in the world. Then the Blessed One uttered the exclamation, Kondanya knows. Kondanya knows. And so what had happened is that he had taught the Dharma and someone had understood. So we can think, forget about the gods and angels. It's just the best way you can use words to say it was an immensely big deal. It was beyond, it was immense, powerfully good, beautiful, something beautiful and radiant set free in the world. He taught it to someone, and someone had understood it. So this moment when the Dharma was communicated and understood for the first time is a very holy, special moment. And I think that place, that deer park, is one of the sites that is a special thing to visit. If you ever go to India, try and go and see it. So what did he teach them? What did he teach them? They had to hear it, they had to reflect on it, and they had to practice it. And all of this, of course, we get on the intro course, which, it's all there. The conditionality over there is chunked down into the Four Noble Truths, and then the whole of the teaching of the Noble Eightfold Path that allows us to transform our entire being in clear, doable stages. It's like a handbook for a happy, fulfilled life. And then we transcend that then. We transcend that into becoming all that human being can be, just like he did. So all we have to do is commit to it and live by it. So we've got the truth of dukkha, the truth of unsatisfactoriness, the truth of the cause of suffering, craving, the truth of the cessation of suffering. Somebody said there's a way out, which is nirvana or enlightenment, and the truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. The way leading to nirvana, enlightenment, is the Noble Eightfold Path. So in other words, craving being present, suffering arises. Craving not being present, suffering does not arise. And it's really good to distinguish straight away the difference between mental suffering and physical pain. Even Buddha experienced physical pain. So there's a lovely story of Shariputra, who's one of the Buddha's friends. They were teaching, and the Buddha said, "Oh, I've got to go and lie down. My back's killing me. Can you take over?" And it's just so human. Yes, he was an enlightened being, but he still experienced physical pain quite a lot as he got older. And he'd get massages from his friends to try and help his shoulders, and he had physical pains. There's no teaching of grinning and bearing it. An enlightened being experiences physical pain, but is equanimous. He doesn't have any stories, or she doesn't have any stories, just the direct experience of the pain, and that's it. But not all pain and suffering is caused by craving. And the Buddha very clearly said no. There's a little bit later, we're going to talk about the teaching of the second dart, which is a really good teaching. But if a tree falls on my head as I leave the centre tonight, how much I suffer will relate to how fully I've realized the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. Because not all suffering is a result of our karma. So there we've got the Noble Eightfold Truths. So now the big test, 30 seconds with your partner. What's the Noble Eightfold Path? What can you remember of the Noble Eightfold Path? All on the intro course. You might not be able, I don't think I can. My minutes now is a lot more. So, 1, just shout it out. Vision, thank you. Just shout it. Oh, and what I want to say, I'm going to just say that we, very, very kind of what genius it was that Sanghagita didn't translate the Pali into right, so right awareness or right vision, because that implies a wrong. So we have perfect, which means that you can practice it, means that you can get better at it until it is perfected. So I thought that just wanted to say, so it's perfect vision. Yeah, and what's 2? Emotion. Just shout them out. Thank you, Vicky. Emotion.
Speech.
Speech. Well done. Fantastic. Next one. What's after speech? Shout. Action. Well done. What's after action? Livelihood, thank you. And that's livelihood. Effort, well done, that's a hard one to remember. Seven. Awareness, wow, you're right. And number 8. Meditation or samadhi, yeah. Yeah, well, meditation or samadhi. And there they are. So we're not going to go into that tonight, but I would really highly recommend these books. So the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path is the newer version, Sarah reliably told me tonight, and the other one, The Vision and Transformation, is the first one, the first published one, but I think they're the same. Oh, Satyajoti's nodding, they're the same. But if you get hold of that one, you can't get that one, don't worry. But these are the new versions, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. Fantastic, fantastic, especially on speech. Speech, very important one. So why did the Buddha start with dukkha? Maybe because that was what it was all about for Siddhartha. That was what it was all about for him. It was finding the meaning in life when all he could see, as far as he could tell, was that you got old, you got sick, and you died. So maybe it started with dukkha because of that. The first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Maybe because he could see that everyone is affected by that. Everyone, every human being is affected by dukkha. And the noble quest was altruistic. He didn't just do it for himself. He wanted to find the answer for everyone, not just for him. He had thousands of lives as a bodhisattva. And he'd come back, and in this one, he finally made it. He knew in every human heart there was a longing for real and lasting satisfaction and fulfillment, and saw how we waste lifetime after lifetime pointlessly chasing after things that we can't possibly be satisfied with. So dissatisfaction with life as it's ordinarily lived, he called dukkha. Always present as long as we haven't seen the nature of reality as impermanent and insubstantial, or that we don't see that we're always changing and that we are deeply and profoundly connected. You'll recognize them as the lakshanas from the intro course. So dukkha. Okay, so you've heard enough talks to know where does dukkha originate from? Where does the word dukkha originate from? Go on, just say. Dukkha. Do I need? Jenny. So du is, I'm sure you know, it means not good, bad, ill, wrong, out of place. And ka is related to chakra, which is wheel. So dukkha kind of means an ill-fitting wheel of a chariot. So you have a bumpy ride through life, you have a jarring ride through life, never comfortable, never at ease. There's a lovely Tara Puja that says something along the lines of where I can never take an easy breath. And there are various types of dukkha, nice, lovely, depressing lists of various types of what the types of dukkha that exist. And I've chosen one. There are several. I like this one. I think it's a good one. So the Buddha said that birth is suffering, old age is suffering, dukkha. Sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Contact with what you dislike is dukkha, and separation from what you like is dukkha. Not getting what you want is dukkha. And so, you might say, he said, one thing only do I teach, suffering and the end of suffering. One thing only do I teach, dukkha and the end of dukkha. So you might say, well, yeah, I agree to some extent, but what about the joy of childbirth? What about the peace of a peaceful death? And that's really true, isn't it? Life can be full of joy and beauty. Life certainly is not all suffering. And we mustn't kind of go down that road of thinking that this teaching is pessimistic or negative. Even in an ordinary life, there is plenty to smile about. But the Buddhist view is that even pleasant experience underneath is painful. Suffering is concealed, glossed over. Somebody, I don't know who it said, was whistling in the dark. So Sanghagita quotes a scholar called Edward Conzer. who identified 4 aspects of concealed suffering he kind of pulled it all together from the teachings of the Buddha. So the first type of concealed suffering is when things are pleasant for us, but contain suffering for others. For example, the cheap t-shirt that might involve sweatshops, that I can't and find it so hard to give up butter. You know, the dairy industry is so much suffering in there, but I still sometimes have butter and milk and things that come from that. And that gives an underlying sense of guilt and unease. So although you're not completely ever with an absolutely clear conscience, and that is suffering. Modern life is hard. You know, my son and his family live in Spain, and I know when I get on a plane to go to Spain that I'm putting the conditions in place, thinking of conditionality, putting the conditions in place that will make the world a much worse place for my grandchildren's grandchildren. But still I go, and it makes me uneasy. So the second form of concealed suffering is that a pleasant experience has the flavor of anxiety because we know it won't last, or we might lose it. And I can remember a time sitting by a canal in Amsterdam. It was a beautiful day, perfect spot in a restaurant, glass of wine in my hand. The people I loved most are all around me, and I just couldn't wait to move to the next thing because I thought this isn't going to last. It was like, it wasn't wise, this isn't going to last so I can relax. It was an unwise, but something's going to happen to come and take this away kind of feeling. So it's got even pleasant experience. You start your ice cream and you know it's going to end. That's another aspect, the second aspect of concealed suffering. The third one is that something pleasant, but we're bound together with something that brings unpleasant experience. For example, the human body. So we're attached to our body because it provides lots of pleasant sensations, but we're bound to it as the unpleasant in it as well. And we can't have one without the other. So the fourth kind of concealed suffering is pleasures derived from the experience of conditioned things that can never satisfy the deepest longings of the heart. And we've all had this. You go on the perfect holiday, and about 5 days in, you're like, Or you achieve the thing that you've always wanted, and it's just not quite the right thing, and you think, oh, well, the next one will be. That kind of itch can only be satisfied by the unconditioned. And this is the difference between ordinary, everyday things that we resort to make dukkha go away, and the truth that goes beyond that resonates deeply with the truth of the 3 jewels. And whatever you call it, this longing, this deep heart wish, can never be satisfied by anything conditioned. So conditioned things, by definition, come into being on the arising of conditions and cease when conditions no longer hold. So whatever conditioned things we may enjoy, there's always a lack, which only the unconditioned, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Arya Sangha, being the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas Sangha, can fulfill. And that which goes beyond conditionality and doesn't cease. And that's why the Buddha taught that all conditioned things are dukkha, either actually painful or potentially painful. So what are we to do? Luckily, after the first rolling, the wheel kept turning, and he continued to teach. He continued to give hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachings about how to navigate this painful, difficult world and reach something much more beautiful. So he said this, and this is a teaching that lots of you will have heard of, called the second dart. He said, when an untaught worldling is touched by a painful bodily feeling, they worry and grieve, lament, beat their breast, and are distraught. They thus experience 2 kinds of feelings, a bodily and a mental feeling. It's as if they were pierced by a dart, and following the first piercing, hit by a second. But in the case of a well-taught noble disciple, that's us, When they are touched by a painful feeling, they will not worry, nor grieve, nor lament, nor beat their breast and weep, nor will they be distraught. It is one kind of feeling they experience, a bodily one, but not a mental one. It's as if they were pierced by a dart, but was not hit by a second dart following the first one. So this person experiences feelings caused by a single dart only. So the painful feeling of your car breaking down. There will be a painful feeling there that goes along with the thought. It might be or something painful in the body that corresponds to mental pain. The car breaks down, we get an unpleasant feeling, what we call Vedana. From there, what we do with that, it's up to us. We can either go, oh, this is just my luck. How long is that swear word breakdown van going to be? I told that person this would happen. Now I can't go to blah, blah. I bet it's something I can't get fixed, and even if it's fixable, I won't be able to afford it. On and on with blame and negativity. And it might even affect the way we speak to people. Anxiety might make us bad-tempered and harsh. Instead of feeling the unpleasant Vedana and responding with awareness and kindness to ourselves, to whatever arises after that point. So it doesn't mean that we're denying our feelings. We might think that this practice is about repression and stuffing down our emotion, but actually it's the opposite of that. Actually, all the hoo-ha, all the kind of blaming and all of the things that we do, like shouting at ourselves or shouting at other people because of things that have gone wrong, actually all of that is designed to distract us from our feelings, is designed to push our feelings down, to distract us away from the actual unpleasant feelings of fear, maybe, or grief, or loss, or anger, or sadness, or disappointment. And the way that the Buddha goes on to talk about that is to respond to the first feeling with love, with metta, bringing tenderness and understanding and speaking kindly to ourselves so that we only experience the pain of the stubbed toe, or the forgotten card when you go to the shops and you've forgotten your card, or you lose your keys again for the 100th time. So just simply feeling what we're feeling is fine, and bringing as much love and awareness to that as we possibly can. But we have this expectation that the car shouldn't break down. It's really interesting. We expect and we say that things have gone wrong. But actually, the car's just doing its thing. Cars do stop. It's our expectation that is the problem. Nothing's broken. Nothing's gone wrong. It's just that's life. Sanghagita says a really good thing that I love. All plans are provisional. That's really good to remember, isn't it? We think we're making plans, but actually, are we really? Can we ever possibly know? So we can practice the second art with dukkha. Don't add to our suffering with our own stories that just pile on top. Another thing we can do is try and formulate a different idea of what happiness is. And just accept that things will, from time to time, be unsatisfactory. The spiritual life, somebody else said, the spiritual life is easy if we don't mind what happens to us. Sanghagita says we're not asked to stop finding life agreeable, if that is our experience, but to acknowledge that however agreeable it may be, it is never wholly so. So he wrote this poem that I really love, that I'll read in a minute, called Life is King. So a third one, which is a really lovely one, I do this quite a lot, is a breathing exercise. So I'd just like, an order member got all of the order to do this one gathering, and we all did it, and I really liked it. So I thought I'd share it with you, and it's up to you. But so you just breathe out, and at the end of the out breath, you just say, I don't know what's going to happen. At the end of the out breath, I don't know what's going to happen. And on the in-breath, but I can bring love to this. But I can bring love to this. Or you can say, but I can respond. So on the end of the out-breath, I don't know what's going to happen. But on the in-breath, you can say something like, can I bring love to this? Or can I respond to this? And as Buddhists, respond means with metta or with mindfulness. So that's something to try when you're in the thick of it. So nearly there. So another thing we can do is realize that as soon as we recognize dukkha, then we're not in dukkha anymore. That's amazing, isn't it? When we recognize it, we're not in dukkha, we're in faith. So then the next step is joy. And that's then you're on the spiral path and you go all the way. And we can just laugh at ourselves, What am I like? I'm expecting life to go my way. And it's not always going to do that. And the last thing I'll just say about it is that we can practice connecting in with the suffering of others. Somewhere in the world, there will be tens of thousands of people, at least one other person you can guarantee, who's going through exactly the same thing as you. And then you can just perhaps, just put your hand on your heart and just connect in with them. They will be breathing, same as you, and you can connect in with their breathing. And that can ease a sense of why me. And we can bring metta to that. Just somewhere else in the world is somebody feeling just like this. And if they had the Dharma, but anyway, so that can ease suffering. So I'm not a huge fan of Sanghagita's poetry. Don't tell anyone. But I do actually like this one. So it's called, because it's so true. It's so true. Life is king. Hour after hour, day after day, we try to grasp the ungraspable, pinpoint the unpredictable. Flowers wither when touched. Ice suddenly cracks beneath our feet. Vainly we try to track bird flight through the sky, trace dumb fish through deep water, try to anticipate the earned smile, the soft reward, even try to grasp our own lives. But life slips through our fingers like snow. Life cannot belong to us. We belong to life. Life is king. That's it.